Welcome and welcome back, fiber friends, to yet another episode of the Wool Skull podcast. Once again, we are in my brand new apartment. I am definitely starting to get things set up and actually unpack all the things that I want to have available to me. So in a most recent video, I did a bunch of natural dyeing, and one of the natural dyes I used was safflower. Now, the cool thing about safflower is that you can get essentially like two different dye yields from it. So the first dye yield you get is this bright yellow color. If you want to go check out the fiber that I dyed, I'm going to link that video down below. However, you can also get a really beautiful pink color from it if you mix the leftovers with soda ash and then soak it again. Now, the thing about this pink color is it's heat sensitive, so it can't be used on like a wool or protein fiber. It needs to be used on a plant fiber. The cool thing about it though is it doesn't require any mordanting or anything like that. And I have a handful of plant fibers that I would really like to spin samples of in general and like talk to you guys about, because it's summer. It's hot. Lots of people don't want to spin wool year round. I do. I spin wool year round, but some people don't want to do that. And so today I thought we would explore some of the plant-based summer fibers that I have available to me and then dye them up with the leftover safflower dye. I might end up making the safflower dyeing a totally different video, so you might have to wait for that. But at minimum, we're going to spin some samples today, and I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the options that we have. So the first bag that I wanted to talk about, the most obvious, I feel like, summer material for a lot of people is going to be cotton. I get questions about cotton all of the time on this channel. Something about cotton is that it has a very short staple. Even the longest stapled cotton is still going to be shorter than I think a lot of wool spinners are comfortable with. That being said, it can be made easier to spin if you adjust your whirl / adjust your ratio to be very high / to add the twist very quickly. You'll notice that the cotton I have here today is not 100% white. Well, some of it is, but some of it is also this wonderful brown color. Some of it is this rust. And then we also have this sort of greenish gold color mixed in. If you are a cotton aficionado, you'll already know what kind of cotton this is. This is Vresies Cotton, or I think in the past they've gone by fox fiber cotton. Essentially, this cotton grows in these natural colors. It grows in colors other than white, and then once you finish this yarn and you boil it, these colors will actually darken. So I'm hoping when I over dye it, it kind of gives us a really interesting result. I'm really excited to see how it turns out. In the past, I've only spun some white cotton that I have gotten from another shop. However, I have been wanting to spin up my Vresies Cotton, and I picked up somebody else's collection of Vresies Cotton at an estate sale, so I thought, why not spin this up? Another really interesting fiber that we're going to be working with today is pineapple. I remember I ordered this at the very beginning of my spinning journey just because I thought it was super interesting, and I kind of like the natural off-white color. In terms of feel, it is really soft. It has kind of a squeaky feel to it, but in a different way than the bamboo that I have, which is going to be another one of the summer fibers that we're going to be spinning up as well. Oh gosh, I just threw it right out of the bag, but this is just pure white bamboo. This is often used in something that spinners often call like a panda blend, where it's like 20% bamboo and 80% wool. I personally don't love spinning 100% bamboo because it is often used as a substitute for silk, and it spins very much like silk, at least for me on its own. I don't like how slippery it is. It reminds me of Tussa silk and spinning 100% Tussa silk. And it definitely has that sort of extruded fiber feel to it. So there are different types of plant-based fiber, and some of these fibers are more or less processed, and a lot of them can actually be found in more or less processed versions if you know where to look. And so what I mean by extruded is that some of them are turned into like a slurry, very similar to the slurries that are created for acrylic yarns and things like that, and then extruded through like the same types of very fine holes to create the fiber. And often it kind of has some would say a plasticky or acrylic-like feel. However, many of these fibers can be found like in an extruded form and then in a less processed form. A lot of the times those fibers are going to be more difficult to find, and they're also not going to be as soft in a lot of cases. But that's not necessarily true across the board. I try not to overgeneralize. The last summer fiber that I'm going to briefly touch upon, but I'm not going to spin a sample of today because frankly, I take no pleasure in it, and there are a bunch of educational videos about spinning silk already available on YouTube, so you should go check those out because I just don't want to do it. I'm going to be so real with you. Part of the reason is because silk prep, especially when you start with something like a silk cap, can be really tricky and sometimes dangerous. So pulling apart a silk cap like this just raw is not a good idea, very dangerous, could cut the heck out of your hands, okay? Silk is really, really strong and the fiber is very, very long. You're not going to be able to rip this with your bare hands. A lot of the times opening up a silk cap like this, despite looking very thin, like I can see light through it, you guys probably can't. It just looks really beautiful to you because the colors on this are really, really nice. But the thing about it is you've got like to poke a hole in the center very carefully. And then honestly, I do recommend putting it over a doorknob, and you have to like very gently and very slowly stretch it out and pull it out. Okay, not all silk is like that. Silk caps come from cocoons. So if you are someone who wants like an ethical silk, there are more ethical silk options that don't involve like killing the silkworm. You just need to look into those. A silk cap that comes from a cocoon, I don't think is an example of one of those that's like super ethical. If that is something that, again, you are concerned about. Silk can come in lots of different formats. Again, a lot of what I have here are gonna be like caps and things like that that still need to be prepped and stretched. But you can get like combed tussa silk and things like that. This is a good example of some combed sari silk. I'm not going to take it out of the box, but sari silk is another really good option if you're looking for like a more ethical silk, because a lot of sari silk is like upcycled, or like a lot of it is sari silk waste, which was something that was going to be thrown away anyway. And so I think that can be a really fun and, again, like ethical / like environmentally friendly way to incorporate silk into your work. But as beautiful as all of these are, and as much as I kind of just like looking at these, I do kind of want to spin a sample of that. I think that might have to be a separate video. Like we might have to do an entirely separate silk video. And I would probably want to buy some other samples of silk for it. And frankly, that's just like not in the budget right now. But I have been eyeing some silk stuff from the Woolery for sure, because they have a lot of really cool different types of silk. And I've never dyed silk before, and I do think that could be a really interesting one for my like indigo experiments. I don't really know. Tell me what you guys think about that in the comments. Okay, wait, speaking of the Woolery, that reminded me, not all sari silk looks the same too. Like this is another example of sari silk. I love this sari silk from the Woolery because A, it's super soft. It's probably the softest sari silk I've ever gotten. It's super affordable, and it comes in a bunch of really, really fun colors, and it's not like a danger to your hands. It's not like intimidating to use. This, you can kind of just, I like mix it right onto my drum carder, which I can't say the same. I would not do that with this silk cap. That would probably do some damage to my drum carder. Honestly, I would not want to do that. But these are a really good option if you want to experiment with silk blends, and again, you are placing an order to the Woolery anyway. Not sponsored, I just, I order stuff from them sometimes. They are a good fiber resource. Okay, so getting back to the matter at hand, I'm not really sure which of these I want to start with. Cause I don't know which of these that you guys would want me to start with. That's really what it is. And so what I think I might do is pull out my Lendrum, because my shaft actually already has a project on it that I've been futzing with for the past few days. I'm gonna pull out my Lendrum, and maybe I'm gonna go live and ask you guys which of these fibers you think that I should start with, and then I think I'm gonna start with that one. Alrighty, so I decided to start with the bamboo because I do feel like, I don't know, bamboo is a summer material. I see it around a lot. I know a lot of like knitters and crocheters love to use bamboo like yarns and things like that. And so I thought, why not start with a sample that I feel like most people are going to be super familiar with, but a little bit maybe more curious about than something as like common as cotton. And so here is our little bamboo sample. Obviously, these are just the singles. I am going to apply them up, but I'm going to apply them up once I have all of the singles spun. And then we're gonna finish them off in a bunch of 2-plies, and then we're probably gonna dye them with that natural dye. One thing about bamboo is it definitely has that shine factor. So it's very similar to silk in that it is very shiny. It's also really strong. So something I noticed that reminded me of the silk spinning process while I was spinning bamboo, I just sometimes forget about, is that like once the twist has entered the bamboo, it can be really difficult to like to like separate it out or like draft it out after the fact, after the twist has entered it. So some fibers like wool are really easy to either like untwist a little bit, right, and draft them out further, or just like kind of pull out sometimes, right? If it's like a low enough twist, you can kind of just like yank the fiber out, and sometimes it evens out a little bit. That is not the case for the bamboo. I actually hurt my like fingers. I didn't cut them, obviously. That is something that you risk with spinning silk, okay? There's a lot of safety precautions that I recommend when spinning silk, and personally, like, I have just never gotten good enough at it to not give myself little like micro abrasions, and so I really just prefer to not spin it. However, bamboo, it reminds me of that a little bit, but is like not as like dangerous and aggressive. You're really gonna have to untwist it if you do let the twist enter it and you want to draft it out further. It does remind me of silk in that it has this kind of like weight, this heaviness to it, okay? And then one thing that I did want to suggest when you are spinning it yourself, if you decide to purchase a little bamboo undyed, or you can get it in a variety of colors, if it comes looking something like this, where it's kind of like a standard comb top, it's a little bit thicker, the way that I found to get the most even spin is to strip it. Now, some people just like to strip all their fiber. That's the way that they get their most consistent spin. That is definitely a way of preparing your fiber in a way to optimize your chances of getting a very consistent yarn, especially if you just started spinning and you're like, all I want is consistent yarn, and every time I try, I just get a lumpy mess. Stripping your fiber is a good way to help with that. So what I mean by stripping is literally just turning it into strips, right? So I saved a little piece of the bamboo so that A, I could show you guys, and B, because I feel like you can see just how like drapey it is just by me wiggling it in the wind. But what I mean by stripping is literally like, if you look at the fiber, you can see there are natural places where it wants to like separate a little bit, right? And if you start to separate those out into strips, thinner strips of fiber that are easier to draft or don't need to be pre-drafted or drafted as much, that's stripping. This is what it means to strip a fiber. It's really simple. It's quite easy. And again, it really makes for a more consistent spin. Even though I have a lot of practice spinning wool, I don't have a ton of practice spinning like 100% bamboo. This was definitely new. So my sample here, although you might not be able to tell because it's all white, I think it'll be easier to tell once it is plied up and it's also dyed. It's not my most consistent work. Something else that I did want to know about bamboo, whether you're spinning it, whether you're blending it, I don't know if the camera is picking it up because I got a new phone recently. I feel like the camera quality is a little bit better than it used to be. I feel like you might be able to see it in some of the shots, but this is flying everywhere. Everywhere. It is in the air. It is just going every which way. I do find that when I blend this on something like a drum carder, I don't like to feed it into the drum directly because I find that it really gets stuck to the liquor in, just like a silk would. This is definitely something I like to apply directly to the drum and then make sure that my little brush is on the back of the drum carder to squish it down, because if it's not settled down, it will fly everywhere. Like it's flying everywhere right now as I'm separating these pieces. And as I was spinning it, so I'm still finding like little bits of the bamboo on my clothes. Even though I've literally changed my outfit completely from last night, I'm still finding it like all around me. And so that's just something else to note about bamboo, is that you might want to spin it in clothes that you're not planning on wearing later on or to see people, because it is gonna get all over you in places that you never thought it could get. Now, as you can see, we have something else on the wheel already. So this is going to be the pineapple fiber. I wanted to spin this because I just like that it's not bright white, that it's not like a plain white color. I like that it's kind of this like neutral, natural color, a little bit of like a gold beige color. It does look like it has some shine to it in the shot, but I'm gonna put it out there. This is a much matter material, like M-A-T-T-E, matte, like a matte lipstick. This is a lot more of a matte look to it than the bamboo does. This does not have that same shine. It does have a little bit of the same weight, and it is pretty drapey. Not as drapey or heavy as the bamboo. It is a little bit lighter, and it's incredibly soft. I think I mentioned that before, but the pineapple fiber is really, really soft, and spinning it has been a lot easier, at least for me, compared to the bamboo. They do have pretty similar staple lengths, which can vary because they're processed fibers, and so technically they can be cut to any length whatsoever. Yeah, I'd say we have like 3, maybe 4 inches, 3.5, 4. No, that's more like 4. That's like a 4-inch staple length, very, very similar to the bamboo. The bamboo was also about a 4-inch staple length. However, I find this to be a lot less slippery compared to the bamboo. I do find myself wanting to strip this material, but not because the twist makes it difficult to control the draft and get an even yarn, but simply because the fiber, it just has kind of a weird way of like bunching up on itself. I think when I was a beginner spinner and I used to hold my fiber too tightly in my hand, in my left hand, because that's the hand that I use to hold my fiber. Again, if you are left-handed, you might hold it in your right hand and draft with your left, and that's totally okay. But when I used to hold my fiber too tightly in this hand, it used to kind of like bunch up, especially if I was spinning like a bat or a comb top, really anything, let's be honest, really anything. I don't know why I'm qualifying that. And spinning this reminds me of that experience, because no matter how gently I try to hold this in my hand, it does seem to sort of bunch up on itself and get misaligned and not as smooth looking. It does, again, have a really interesting texture to it that's not slippery. It does have kind of a, the fibers catch on each other a little bit more and a little bit better than something like a bamboo. I won't go as far as saying that it catches on itself like a wool or an alpaca or a goat would. It definitely sticks to itself more than the bamboo does or than the cotton does, at least in my experience. Anyway, I'm going to get back to spinning the sample. Once I'm finished with it, I'm going to show you guys the bobbin, and then we're going to start spinning the cotton sample, and I'll talk a little bit about the cotton as well. Another sample, bites the dust. I have our pineapple sample all finished up. As you can see by the lighting, it's clearly later. Frankly, it's almost 8 o'clock, but I really want to get these samples done if I can and put them into the safflower dye that I have set aside. So what I need to do is switch out my flyer. Why? Because cotton has a really, really short staple. So it needs a lot of twist to hold it together. So even the highest ratio that we can accomplish here, so the smallest whirl size here, is not going to add quite as much twist as quickly as I would want it to be able to easily and quickly spin this cotton yarn. And so what I'm going to do instead is switch it out for this faster flyer. As you can see, the ratios are much higher on this because the whirls are a lot smaller. And so we're going to be able to add a lot more twist, a lot faster. It'll just make spinning the cotton a lot easier in general. So if you've tried spinning cotton before, however you try to spin it on, say, the same ratio that you would normally spin wool, I might recommend giving it another try, but first adjusting your ratio or your whirl size to help you out a little bit. Now that we have our wheel properly set up, again, switching out the flyer is pretty easy, just like switching out the whirl. Nothing really changes about the wheel except for, again, how much twist you're adding and how quickly. We're gonna decide which cotton I'm actually going to spin. As I mentioned earlier today, we have some of this like naturally colored cotton, and I would really like to spin this like mix of it because I think it'll take on the dye really interesting. And so I'm going to start spinning up this sample, and I'm gonna go live and chat with y'all. So I'm gonna check back in a little bit. And voila, we have our samples. Okay, so we have the pineapple, we have the cotton, and we have the bamboo. All of these are still in singles. I've turned them into center ply balls, or like center pull balls. I call them center ply because that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna ply up these singles and turn them into 2-ply yarns. I'm really trying to get this done before I head to a wedding that I have to go to. But one thing I will say about the cotton, at least spinning it this time, is that it was a lot easier. Every time I spin cotton, it does get a little bit easier. It's definitely very different from wool. I'm always wary to say that like it's inherently more difficult to spin than wool, because I truly feel like if you're motivated to spin something or a certain material type, then you're gonna figure it out and you're gonna be able to do it. And cotton is like anything else. It takes a little bit of time to adjust. I do really like that this colored cotton has a little bit of a longer staple length. I did find it a little bit easier to spin as a result. And using the fast flyer made it super duper easy. I have to say, having a lot of twist added very quickly really made this a pretty easy spin. And I have to say, it's probably one of my most consistent cotton spins so far. All right, fiber friends, so we have our plied bobbins, and I did want to just take a second to talk about how difficult it was to ply each of these. I'm not gonna lie, I was cursing the pineapple fiber. As much as I enjoy that it sort of catches on itself for the sake of like while you're spinning the singles, the plying ball was a mess. It was a nightmare. These singles are not even that like thin, right? And they were just getting so unbelievably caught on each other and like knotted in one another. It was terrible. I really did not like plying the pineapple fiber. The bamboo fiber was better, but it was not my favorite to ply, because considering this is so like slippery and shiny, I just felt like, and the singles clearly are chunky, right? Like this is a thicker yarn. These singles also got caught on each other in a way that really irritated me and ended up causing like premature pilling on this yarn before it was even finished, which did irritate me. I have to say, if you're not someone who generally spins like worsted style, spinning bamboo woolen is, I don't know, like you can do it. There's a reason it's not as common or recommended, especially if it's like bamboo all by itself, just because like you can see sort of like the halo, the like little hairs that are sticking up, and those are definitely going to pill. I mean, most fibers pill, so I feel like it's a pro and a con. It's all a balance. It doesn't necessarily mean that like bamboo is bad. I'm just trying to note things that I noticed while I was plying and that you might want to take into consideration if you want to try spinning these fibers. My favorite to ply was the cotton. It was easy, it was a pleasure. I love the way the finished cotton looks. I really want to take this off of the bobbin and get it on the nitty knotty, and then I need to get all of these in a dye bath to naturally dye them, but I'm gonna show them to you before I do that, and I'm gonna sign off, and then I have to head to a wedding this weekend, so I'll check in with you guys after this weekend. And here we have it, fiber friends. Okay, so these are our finished samples. I do feel like the way the lighting is right now, you can clearly see how shiny the bamboo is, especially compared to the very matte pineapple and the very matte cotton. Okay, in terms of drapiness, I mean, they're all pretty drapey. I think the bamboo is losing some of its drape factor just because, as you can see, I did spin it a little bit thicker than these samples. The cotton has a nice drape to it, but the pineapple is like so drapey. It's drapey like alpaca is drapey, at least in my opinion. It's also a really, really soft sample. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. I feel like a lot of the times people imagine these alternative fibers as being like very coarse, similar to a lot of like linen samples that people have put hands on, but it really depends on where you're getting it, how it's processed, all of that fun stuff. Some of these can just be a really, really soft summer fiber alternative if you're looking for something, Or I forgot to even mention if you're allergic to wool. Obviously, these are also options for you if you're allergic to wool. The last thing I wanted to know about these samples before I finished up this video is that some of them do have a scent. In particular, I wanted to mention that bamboo fiber, along with many other, again, like slurry, acrylic adjacent fibers, have like a scent to them, a unique scent that I find doesn't necessarily go away with washing. It's just kind of the way the fiber smells. I wouldn't necessarily call it like an unpleasant smell. It is like vaguely industrial, but not in a super aggressive way. But I did just want to mention that because I mentioned a lot of the like sensory factors for these fibers and how they can, I don't know, they can bother some people's sensory issues, but obviously some people's sensory issues are bothered by wool and alpaca, and these are much better for their sensory issues. So everybody's different. If smell doesn't bother you, you might not even notice it. I just have noticed that every time I work with specifically something that's 100% bamboo, as opposed to like a blend, it does have a little bit of a particular scent to it. Whereas like these two samples don't have any smell to them. They smell just like natural, I guess. Anyway, I do think that's gonna be all for now, fiber friends. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for the suggestion for this video that people have been asking in the comments for like a summer fiber or like a non-wool based episode, and this was actually really fun to do. I do think I have like some other summer fiber experiments coming up. However, if there's a fiber that you'd like me to try or you think that I would be interested in, please comment it below. I would definitely like to hear about it. If you want to see more of my videos, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Wool to Gold podcast.